At the hearing, they said I owed them $18,000. My ex-boyfriend Ryan and his mother Carol stood there in their Sunday best, looking like the perfect victims. They had a lawyer. They had printed documents. They had rehearsed tears. The judge looked directly at me and asked if I had any proof to dispute their claim. I didn't say a word. I just pulled out my phone, scrolled to one screenshot, and handed it to the bailiff. 30 seconds. That's all it took. Carol's face drained of color so fast I thought she might faint. Ryan started stammering like a broken record. Their lawyer actually took a step backward. And the judge? She removed her glasses, looked at them with pure disgust, and said words I'll never forget. Did you really think you'd get away with this? This is the story of how I went from being a trusting girlfriend to someone who learned the most valuable lesson of my life. Always, always keep receipts. Because the people closest to you, they might be the ones planning to destroy you. My name is Emma. I'm 30 now, but this story starts when I was 28 and convinced I'd finally figured out my life. I was working as a graphic designer for a mid-sized marketing firm in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had my own apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I had good friends. I had my health. I was happy. Then I met Ryan. It was one of those perfect romantic comedy meetings. I was at a coffee shop called Brew and Pages, this cute little place near downtown that does open mic poetry nights. I wasn't there for poetry. I'm not that hip. I was just working on a freelance logo design with my headphones in, completely in my zone. Ryan sat down at the table next to mine. Tall, maybe 6'2", with this effortless smile and perfectly messy brown hair. He was wearing a well-fitted suit, but had loosened his tie, like he'd just come from somewhere important. He ordered a black coffee, which I later learned was a lie. He actually hated black coffee, but thought it made him seem sophisticated, and then his laptop wouldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. He asked if I was having the same problem. I wasn't, but I helped him troubleshoot anyway. We got to talking. He told me he worked in pharmaceutical sales, that he'd just closed a huge deal with a hospital network, that he was celebrating by taking the afternoon off. He asked about my design work, actually seemed interested, asked smart questions. By the time I packed up to leave, he'd asked for my number. I gave it to him. That night, he texted me. Not immediately. He waited exactly 4 hours, which I later realized was calculated, and asked if I wanted to grab dinner that weekend. Our first date was incredible. He took me to this Italian restaurant I'd been dying to try, let me order whatever I wanted, told me stories about growing up in North Carolina, asked about my family. He had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the room. When he kissed me goodnight, I felt butterflies I hadn't felt in years. We dated for 3 months before things got serious. He was attentive without being clingy, successful without being arrogant, funny without being mean. My friends loved him. My parents thought he was great when they visited. Everyone kept saying the same thing, Emma, you finally found a good one. Then he asked me to move in with him. Actually, that's not quite accurate. He asked if he could move in with me. He said his lease was ending, that my apartment was bigger, that it made financial sense. He offered to split everything 50-50. Rent, utilities, groceries, everything. He even showed me his bank statements to prove he could afford it. I saw direct deposits from his job. I saw a healthy savings account balance. Everything looked legitimate. I said yes. That was my first mistake. Not because moving in together is bad, but because I didn't verify anything. I trusted the bank statements he showed me. I didn't know then that you could fake bank statements with a decent printer and basic Photoshop skills. And Ryan? Ryan was dating a graphic designer. He knew exactly what I could and couldn't spot. The first few months of living together were perfect. We fell into this comfortable routine. I'd work from home some days, he'd leave early for sales calls, we'd cook dinner together, binge Netflix shows, have lazy Sunday mornings. It felt like we were building something real. Then I met Carol, his mother. Ryan had mentioned her before but always kept things vague. She lives nearby. She's great. You'll love her. He never explained why she hadn't come to meet me earlier, why she wasn't at his birthday dinner we'd thrown, why she seemed to be this peripheral presence in his life. When she finally showed up at our apartment, I understood the delay. Carol was a lot. She arrived unannounced on a Saturday morning with a Tupperware container of baked ziti and opinions about everything. Our furniture arrangement was wrong. My curtains were too dark. We needed more plants. I needed to make sure Ryan was eating better because he looked thin. But she was sweet in her way. Overbearing, sure, but she seemed to genuinely care. She hugged me, called me sweetheart, and told Ryan he'd better not screw this relationship up. I laughed it off. Ryan looked uncomfortable, but didn't say anything. Carol started coming around more. Once a week, then twice a week. She'd bring food, reorganize our kitchen without asking, give unsolicited advice about our relationship. Make sure you're not smothering him, she'd tell me. Men need space. Or, Ryan works so hard. You need to appreciate him more. I found it annoying but harmless. My own mom could be pushy too. I figured it was just a mother thing. Then, around month 8, everything started to crack. Ryan came home one night in a terrible mood. He said a major deal had fallen through. A hospital system he'd been courting for months had gone with a competitor. He was furious, throwing his jacket across the room, pacing like a caged animal. I tried to comfort him, but he snapped at me. You don't get it, Emma. This was supposed to be my commission for the year. I'm screwed. I asked what he meant. He said sales worked on commission, that his base salary was minimal, that he'd been counting on this deal to carry him through the next quarter. I felt terrible for him. I told him we'd figure it out, that I could cover a bit more of the expenses until he got back on his feet. He looked at me with these puppy dog eyes and said, "Really? You'd do that?" Of course I would. That's what partners do, right? They support each other. That was my second mistake. The requests started small. He'd forget his wallet when we went out to eat. He'd ask if I could cover groceries this week because his paycheck was delayed. He'd need gas money to get to a sales meeting. $50 here. $100 there. Nothing that seemed like a red flag at the time. Then it escalated. One morning, he told me he couldn't make rent that month. He said his commission check was processing but wouldn't clear in time. He asked if I could cover his half, $900, and he'd pay me back the moment his check hit. I was frustrated but agreed. I had savings. I could float it. His check never came. When I asked about it, he said there had been a processing error with payroll. It would be another 2 weeks. Then another week after that. Then it became, "Emma, can you stop nagging me about this? I'm stressed enough as it is." I started covering rent every month. Then utilities. Then groceries. Then his car insurance payment because he said he couldn't afford it and needed his car for work. I kept telling myself it was temporary. He'd get a big sale. Things would turn around. I just had to be patient. Then Carol called me. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was working on a client presentation when my phone rang. Carol's name lit up the screen. We'd exchanged numbers months ago, but she'd never called me directly before. "Emma, sweetie, do you have a minute?" Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying. I put down my work. "What's wrong?" She said Ryan was in trouble. Big trouble. He'd apparently borrowed money from a former business partner to invest in some cryptocurrency venture. I know, red flag central, and the investment had tanked. Now the business partner was too proud to ask you, Carol said. Ryan owed him $4,000 and didn't have it. This man sounds dangerous. Ryan thinks he might send someone to, I don't know, hurt him or something. I can't lose my son. Please. My heart was racing. Ryan hadn't mentioned any of this. Why didn't he tell me? Because he doesn't want you to think less of him, Carol said, her voice breaking. He loves you so much. He's just in over his head. If you could help, just this once, I promise we'll pay you back. I'll pay you back myself if I have to. I felt sick. The thought of Ryan being hurt, of him suffering because of money when I had money sitting in my savings account. I couldn't stand it. I transferred Carol $3,000 that afternoon. She cried on the phone, thanking me, promising it was temporary, swearing she'd have it back to me within a month. She never paid me back. A week later, Ryan needed money for a car repair. $800. His transmission was failing, he said. He couldn't get to work without his car. I paid for it. 2 weeks after that, Carol called again. She needed help with her electric bill, $500, or they'd shut off her power. I sent it. Then Ryan needed $600 for a dental emergency, $300 for new work clothes, $400 because he'd gotten a parking ticket and couldn't afford the fine, $700 to help Carol with her mortgage. Every single time, they promised to pay me back. Every single time, I believed them. I started tracking everything in my notes app. I'm a designer. I'm organized by nature. I made a simple spreadsheet. Date, amount, reason, who I gave it to. I told myself I was being smart, protecting myself, making sure I'd get paid back eventually. But deep down, I think I knew. I was being used. My friends started noticing. Jade, my best friend since college, asked why I was never coming out anymore. I told her money was tight. She looked at me like I was crazy. You make good money, Em. Where's it all going? I didn't want to admit it. Admitting it made it real. Then one night, I came home early from a client meeting. Ryan was in the living room on the phone, and he didn't hear me come in. I heard him laugh and say, "Yeah, she's covering it. I told you she would. She's so easy." I froze in the hallway. The voice on the other end said something I couldn't hear, and Ryan laughed again. Dude, I'm telling you, dating a girl with a stable job is the best decision I ever made. She's basically my ATM. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched. I wanted to storm in there, scream at him, throw him out. But I didn't. I just stood there, shaking, listening. Carol's doing the same thing. Calls her with some sob story, and boom, Emma sends money. It's genius. We've probably pulled in, $9 grand from her so far. $9 grand. I'd given them $9,200, according to my notes app. And they were laughing about it. I quietly backed out of the apartment and sat in my car for an hour, crying. Not because of the money, money can be replaced. But because the person I loved, the person I'd trusted, the person I'd built a life with, he saw me as a mark. A target. An ATM. That night, I decided to do something I should have done months ago. I pulled his credit report. I have a friend, Marcus, who works in mortgage lending. We went to college together, and he owes me a favor from when I designed his wedding invitations for free. I called him that night and asked if there was any way, hypothetically, of course, that someone could check another person's credit. Marcus was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Emma, you're living with this guy, right? You're thinking about marriage. Maybe? I don't know. Then you have every right to know what you're getting into. Give me his info." I felt guilty. It felt like a violation of Ryan's privacy. But after what I'd heard, I needed to know. 2 days later, Marcus called me back. You sitting down?" I sat. "Your boyfriend has a credit score in the low 500s. He's got 3 maxed-out credit cards in collections. 2 personal loans he defaulted on. A car repossession from 2 years ago. And he owes $16,000 in back rent to a landlord in Raleigh." My hands went numb. "There's more," Marcus said. "His mom's a co-signer on 2 of those loans. Her credit's trashed too. Emma, these people are professional deadbeats. I don't know what he's told you, but this guy doesn't have a pot to piss in." I hung up and immediately pulled up Ryan's LinkedIn. Pharmaceutical sales rep at MedTech Solutions. I Googled the company. It didn't exist. I searched his name plus MedTech Solutions. Nothing. I searched his name plus pharmaceutical sales. Nothing. I checked his Facebook, which he rarely used. His last post was from 3 years ago, a check-in at a Lowe's home improvement store with the caption, "New job, new opportunities." He was wearing an orange apron. He'd worked at Lowe's. Not in pharmaceutical sales. At Lowe's. Everything was a lie. The job, the sales calls, the commissions, the bank statements, everything. I didn't confront him that night. I needed a plan. I spent 3 days planning. I transferred money from our joint checking account, which I'd stupidly opened with him, back into my personal account. I contacted my landlord and confirmed that only my name was on the lease. I called a locksmith and scheduled an appointment for that Friday. I packed Ryan's things into boxes and bags while he was at work. When he came home Friday night, I was waiting. "We need to talk," I said. He smiled, oblivious. "Sure, babe. What's up?" I slid a printed copy of his credit report across the table. "Want to explain this?" His face changed instantly. The smile vanished. His eyes went cold. "Where did you get that?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is that you've been lying to me. About everything. Your job. Your money. Your entire life." He stood up. You had no right to steal from me," I snapped. $9,000, Ryan. $9,000 I gave you and your mother, and you were never planning to pay me back, were you? He didn't answer. "Get out." He laughed. Actually laughed. "This is my apartment too." "No, it's not. Your name's not on the lease. And you haven't paid rent in 6 months. You're not a tenant. You're a guest. And I'm asking you to leave. You can't do this. Watch me. Your stuff's in the hallway. I've already changed the locks. You've got 10 minutes to take your things and go, or I'm calling the police." That's when he got mean. He called me every name in the book. Told me I was a bitter, controlling psycho. Said I'd never find anyone better than him. That I was lucky he'd even stayed this long. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just opened the door and said, 9 minutes. He grabbed his stuff and left. Slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I locked the door, sat on the couch, and finally let myself cry. Not because I missed him, but because I'd been so stupid. Carol called 2 hours later. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Emma, Ryan told me what happened. You're making a huge mistake. He loves you. Please call me back." I blocked her number. I blocked Ryan's. I blocked everyone associated with him. And then I tried to move on. 3 months passed. 3 peaceful, Ryan-free months. I threw myself into work. Picked up freelance projects. Started going to therapy. Slowly started to feel like myself again. Jade kept telling me I dodged a bullet, and she was right. Then, on a random Tuesday morning in June, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find a man in a polo shirt holding a clipboard. "Emma Richardson?" "Yes." He handed me a manila envelope. "You've been served. Have a nice day." He walked away before I could respond. I stood there, staring at the envelope, my heart pounding. I ripped it open right there in the doorway. Inside was a small claims court summons. Ryan and Carol were suing me for $18,000. I actually laughed. Out loud. Standing in my doorway in my pajamas, I laughed like a maniac because this was so absurd it couldn't be real. The complaint said I had borrowed money from them over the course of our relationship. That I'd failed to pay rent on time, forcing Ryan to cover my portion. That I'd damaged property in the apartment, scratched floors, They were claiming Ryan carpets, had loaned me $12,000. That I'd promised to pay them back and had refused to honor my financial obligations. They had documents. They had a court date 3 weeks away. I called Jade immediately. She came over, read the complaint, and said, "This is fraud. Like, actual criminal fraud." "I know. You have proof you gave them money, right?" I pulled up my notes app. Showed her the spreadsheet. Every date. Every amount. Every Venmo transaction. Every bank transfer. Every text message where they'd asked for money. Jade grinned. "Oh, they're screwed." I hired a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Linda Chun, and she specialized in small claims and fraud cases. She was in her 40s, sharp as a knife, with a no-nonsense attitude I immediately loved. I showed her everything. The spreadsheet. The Venmos. The bank records. The text messages. She looked up at me and smiled. Emma, not only are we going to win this case, we're going to destroy them. We filed a counterclaim. I wasn't just going to defend myself, I was going to get my money back. All $9,200. Plus interest. Plus legal fees. Linda also did something I hadn't thought of. She requested copies of the bank statements Ryan and Carol had submitted as evidence. The ones showing they'd allegedly transferred money to me. When we got them, Linda laid them out on her desk and laughed. These are fake. Badly fake. She pointed to inconsistencies I hadn't noticed. Font sizes that didn't match real bank statements. Alignment issues. Transaction codes that didn't exist. One of the statements showed a transfer on a date that was a federal holiday. Banks don't process transfers on federal holidays. They made these in Word, Linda said. And they're going to prison for it. The 3 weeks leading up to the hearing were the most stressful of my life. I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. in a panic, convinced that somehow they'd win, that I'd be ordered to pay them money I didn't owe, that my life would be ruined. Linda kept reassuring me. Emma, you have documentation. Real documentation. They have lies. The judge will see through this in 5 minutes. But I couldn't shake the fear. Because I'd trusted Ryan once. I'd believed his lies. What if the judge did too? I prepared obsessively. I printed every Venmo receipt. Every bank statement. Every text message. I organized everything into a binder with tabs and labels. Linda told me I didn't need to do all that. She had digital copies of everything, but I needed the control. I needed to feel prepared. Jade helped me practice. She'd pretend to be Ryan's lawyer, asking me aggressive questions, trying to trip me up. Isn't it true you were financially irresponsible? Isn't it true Ryan had to cover your expenses? I practiced staying calm, stating facts, not getting emotional. The night before the hearing, I barely slept. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios. What if the judge didn't believe me? What if Ryan and Carol were more convincing? What if I'd missed something? At 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I got up, showered, put on my most professional outfit, a navy blue suit I'd bought for client presentations, and tried to eat breakfast. I managed half a piece of toast. Jade drove me to the courthouse. Linda met us there, carrying a briefcase and radiating confidence. You ready? She asked. I wasn't. But I nodded anyway. Small claims court isn't like what you see on TV. There's no jury. No dramatic music. Just a windowless room with fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, and a judge who's probably heard 1,000 cases exactly like yours. Ryan and Carol were already there when we arrived. Ryan wore a suit that looked like he'd borrowed it from someone twice his size. Carol wore a church dress and had tissues in her hand, props, I realized. They were going to play the victims. Their lawyer was a guy in his 30s named Derek something. Cheap suit. Knockoff briefcase. He looked nervous, kept checking his phone, avoided eye contact. We sat on opposite sides of the room. Ryan stared at me. I stared straight ahead. The bailiff called the case. Richardson versus Thompson and Thompson. We all stood. The judge entered, a black woman in her 50s named Judge Patricia Morales. She had gray hair, kind eyes, and an expression that said she'd seen every scam in the book. Please be seated, she said. This is a small claims case. The plaintiffs, Ryan Thompson and Carol Thompson, allege that the defendant, Emma Richardson, owes them $18,000 for loans and unpaid rent. Ms. Richardson has filed a counterclaim for $9,200. Mr. Pierce, you're representing the plaintiffs. Derek stood. Yes, Your Honor. Proceed. Derek cleared his throat and launched into his opening statement. He painted Ryan as a loving boyfriend who'd supported me financially throughout our relationship. He said Ryan had covered my half of the rent multiple times when I couldn't afford it. That Carol had loaned me money for personal emergencies. That I'd promised to pay them back and had ghosted them after the relationship ended. He presented printed bank statements, the fake ones. He presented a handwritten ledger Carol had supposedly kept, documenting every dollar they'd given me. He even presented photos of the apartment, pointing to scratches on the hardwood floor and a stain on the carpet as evidence of property damage. Judge Morales listened without expression. When Derek finished, she turned to Linda. "Miss Chin." Linda stood. She didn't grandstand. Didn't raise her voice. Just stated facts. "Your Honor, everything the plaintiffs just said is a lie. Ms. Richardson didn't borrow money from them, she loaned money to them. Over $9,000, in fact. We have documentation of every single transaction. Venmo receipts. Bank transfers. Text messages where Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Thompson explicitly asked for money and promised to repay it. Furthermore, the bank statements submitted by the plaintiffs are falsified. We can prove it." Judge Morales raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious accusation, Ms. Chen." "I'm aware, Your Honor. And I'm prepared to back it up." The judge nodded. "Let's see your evidence." Linda handed the bailiff a folder. Inside was everything. The judge flipped through it slowly, her expression unchanging. She looked at Venmo receipts showing money going from my account to Ryan's. She looked at bank statements showing withdrawals from my account on the exact dates Ryan had asked for money. She looked at text messages. One text in particular caught her attention. It was from Ryan, dated 4 months into our relationship. "Baby, I'm so sorry to ask, but can you cover me for $600? My commission check got delayed again. I'll pay you back Friday, I promise. Love you." The judge read it twice. Then she looked at Ryan. "Mr. Thompson, did you send this text?" Ryan hesitated. "Your Honor, I don't remember every text It's a yes or no question. Did you send this text to Ms. Richardson asking her for $600? Yes, but... And did you pay her back?" Silence. Judge Morales looked back at the file. She cross-referenced my bank statements with the dates in Carol's handwritten ledger. They didn't match. Where Carol claimed she'd loaned me money, my bank records showed no deposits. In fact, on several of those dates, I'd made transfers to Carol. The judge's expression hardened. She picked up one of the bank statements Derek had submitted, one that allegedly showed Ryan transferring $1,500 to me. She compared it to my actual bank statement from that same date. "Ms. Chin, you said these bank statements are falsified. Explain." This was the moment. Linda nodded at me. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. I'd bookmarked the screenshot weeks ago, knowing I'd need it. I found it and handed my phone to the bailiff. The screenshot showed a side-by-side comparison I'd made. On the left was the fake bank statement Ryan had submitted, showing a $1,500 transfer from his account to mine on March 14th. On the right was my actual bank statement from March 14th. No deposit. No $1,500. Nothing. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was what I'd added to the screenshot, a third image showing a Venmo transaction from that same date. $500. From me to Ryan. With a memo, "For rent, good luck with your meeting tomorrow." On the day Ryan claimed he'd given me $1,500, I'd actually given him $500. The judge stared at the screenshot, then at the fake bank statement, then at Ryan and Carol. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Judge Morales handed my phone back to the bailiff, who returned it to me. Then she picked up another one of the fake statements and examined it closely. She pulled out a pair of reading glasses, leaned in, and studied the document like it was evidence in a murder trial. "Mr. Pierce," she said finally, "where did you get these bank statements?" Derek looked panicked. "My clients provided them, Your Honor." "And did you verify their authenticity?" I trusted my clients, Your Honor." Wrong answer. The judge's expression went ice cold. "You submitted documents to this court without verifying them. Documents that appear to be falsified. Do you understand the severity of that?" Derek was sweating. "Your Honor, if I'd known." "You should have known. That's your job." She turned to Ryan and Carol. "Mr. Thompson. Mrs. Thompson. Did you create these bank statements?" Carol started crying. Real tears this time, not the fake ones she'd been preparing. Your Honor, we were just trying to get our money back. Answer the question. Did you fabricate these documents? Ryan tried to speak. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. No words came out. Judge Morales didn't wait for an answer. She'd already made up her mind. I've seen a lot of cases in this courtroom, Judge Morales said. I've seen people lie about debts. I've seen people exaggerate damages. I've seen people misremember facts. But this. She held up the fake bank statements. This is fraud. This is a deliberate, premeditated attempt to deceive this court and steal money from Ms. Richardson. Carol was openly sobbing now. Ryan looked like he might throw up. Derek was packing up his briefcase, probably planning his exit strategy. The plaintiff's claim is dismissed. With prejudice. That means you can never bring this case again. Furthermore, I'm granting the defendant's counterclaim in full. Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Thompson, you are ordered to pay Ms. Richardson $9,200 within 30 days. You will also pay her legal fees, which Ms. Chin will calculate and submit to the court. And you will pay court costs. She wasn't done. I'm also referring this case to the district attorney's office for investigation. Filing false documents with the court is a crime. A serious crime. You could face criminal charges, fines, and jail time. Mr. Pierce, I'm filing a complaint with the State Bar regarding your conduct. You submitted falsified documents without due diligence, and that's unacceptable. Derek looked like he wanted to argue, but wisely kept his mouth shut. Judge Morales looked at me. Her expression softened slightly. Ms. Richardson, I'm sorry you had to go through this. But I commend you for keeping such thorough records. That documentation saved you today. Without it, this would have been a he said she said situation, and those are much harder to resolve. You did everything right. I felt tears welling up but forced them back. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. The moment we stepped out of the courtroom, I collapsed against the wall. My legs felt like jelly. Linda put a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I don't know, I said honestly. That was intense. I know. But you won. Completely. Jade hugged me. That screenshot was brilliant. How did you even think to make that comparison? I didn't, really. I was going through my records one night, cross-referencing everything, and I noticed the date discrepancy. I took a screenshot just in case. I didn't know if it would matter, but it mattered, Linda said. It was the nail in their coffin. The judge was already skeptical, but that screenshot proved malicious intent. That's what pushed this from a civil dispute into criminal territory. We walked outside into the bright afternoon sun. I felt like I'd been in that courtroom for days, not 2 hours. I looked back at the courthouse entrance. Ryan and Carol were coming out with Derek. Carol was still crying. Ryan looked shell-shocked. Derek was on his phone, probably calling his malpractice insurance. Ryan saw me. For a second, our eyes met. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt sad. Sad that someone I'd loved had turned out to be such a liar. Sad that it had come to this. Then I turned away and walked to Jade's car. The check arrived 2 weeks later. $9,200. Plus another $3,100 for legal fees. Plus $800 for court costs. Total, $13,100. I stared at it for a long time. Part of me wanted to frame it. Part of me wanted to burn it. Instead, I deposited it and paid off my credit card, which I'd maxed out covering Ryan's expenses. But the money was only part of the story. Linda called me 3 days after the hearing. The DA's office is moving forward. They're charging Ryan with fraud and filing a false instrument. Carol's being charged as an accessory. Their lawyer is being investigated by the State Bar. What does that mean? I asked. It means they're in serious trouble. Ryan could face up to a year in jail. Carol could get probation. And they'll both have criminal records. I should have felt satisfied. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I just felt exhausted. Linda wasn't done. There's something else. The DA found another victim. My stomach dropped. What? Ryan's ex-girlfriend. From 3 years ago. Her name's Ashley. She came forward after seeing the court records. Apparently, Ryan pulled the same scam on her. He and Carol claimed she owed them money, threatened to sue, and she paid them $4,000 to make them go away. I felt sick. She paid them. She was scared. She didn't have documentation like you did. She thought she'd lose in court. So she just paid them and tried to move on. That's awful. It gets worse. The DA thinks there might be more victims. They're investigating. Ryan and Carol might have been running this scam for years. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. How many other women had Ryan targeted? How many had he charmed, dated, moved in with, bled dry, and then extorted? How many had paid out of fear rather than fight? I thought about Ashley. I didn't know her, but I felt connected to her. We'd both fallen for the same lies. The difference was I'd kept receipts. 2 months later, Linda called with an update. Ryan had taken a plea deal. He pled guilty to fraud and was sentenced to 18 months in jail, with credit for time served. Carol pled guilty to accessory charges and got 2 years probation plus 300 hours of community service. They were both ordered to pay restitution to Ashley $4,000 and to me for additional damages the DA's office had calculated. Derek, the lawyer, was suspended by the state bar for 6 months and required to take remedial ethics courses. His career was basically over. I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. Like I'd won the battle but lost something in the process. My ability to trust, maybe. My optimism about relationships. My belief that people are generally good. Jade told me I'd get that back. You didn't lose yourself, Em. You just learned a hard lesson. And you survived it. That's what matters. I started therapy. Not because of the court case, though that was part of it, but because I needed to understand how I'd let this happen. How I'd missed so many red flags. How I'd allowed myself to be manipulated for so long. My therapist, Dr. Patel, told me something that stuck with me. You weren't stupid. You were kind. And people like Ryan and Carol? They target kindness. They see generosity as weakness, empathy as opportunity. But the solution isn't to stop being kind. It's to be kind with boundaries. I thought about that a lot. About boundaries. About the difference between supporting someone and enabling them. About how love shouldn't cost you everything. 6 months after the hearing, I was in a better place. I'd moved to a new apartment, a fresh start. I'd gotten a promotion at work. I'd started dating again, cautiously, taking things slow. And I'd learned some things. Hard-earned, painful things that I wish I'd known at 28. First, document everything. Every transaction. Every conversation. Every promise. I'm not talking about being paranoid or controlling. I'm talking about protecting yourself. If someone asks you for money, keep a record. If someone promises to pay you back, get it in writing. A simple text that says, "Thanks for lending me $500. I'll pay you back Friday," is legal documentation. Use it. Second, trust your instincts. I knew something was wrong months before I confronted Ryan. I felt it in my gut. But I ignored it because I didn't want to be that girlfriend who didn't trust her partner. That was a mistake. Your instincts exist for a reason. Listen to them. Third, set boundaries. Helping your partner is one thing. Bankrolling their entire life is another. If you're consistently the only one contributing financially, that's not a partnership, that's exploitation. Real partners don't drain you. They build with you. Fourth, watch for the red flags. Vague job descriptions. Constantly delayed paychecks. Borrowed money that never gets repaid. Guilt trips when you ask questions. Involving family members to pressure you. These aren't quirks. They're warning signs. Fifth, you're not responsible for saving anyone. I thought if I just supported Ryan enough, if I was patient enough, if I loved him enough, things would get better. But you can't fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. And you can't save someone who's actively trying to drag you down with them. A year after the hearing, I ran into Carol at a grocery store. I almost didn't recognize her. She looked older, tired, defeated. She was in the checkout line ahead of me, counting out exact change for a small bag of groceries. She didn't see me. I could have left. Should have left. But something made me stay. When she turned to leave, we made eye contact. She froze. For a second, I thought she might say something, apologize, maybe, or hurl an insult. Instead, she just looked at me with empty eyes and walked away. I felt nothing. No anger. No satisfaction. Just nothing. Jade asked me later if I regretted pressing charges. No, I said. And I meant it. Not because I wanted revenge, but because they needed to be stopped. Ashley deserved justice. Future victims deserved protection. And I deserved to hold them accountable. The criminal case closed last month. Ryan's out of jail now, living with a relative somewhere in Tennessee. Carol's finished her probation. Derek's suspension is over, but from what I hear, he's not practicing law anymore, working in his family's insurance business instead. As for me, I'm good. Really good. I'm dating someone new, someone with an actual job, an actual apartment, and actual respect for boundaries. Someone who insists on splitting everything 50-50 and gets uncomfortable if I pay for too much. Someone who, when I told him this whole story, said, "I'm so sorry that happened to you. And I'm so impressed that you fought back." I'm still a graphic designer. Still living in Charlotte. Still keeping detailed records of everything, because that's just who I am now. But I'm not bitter. I'm not broken. I'm just wiser. Looking back, that screenshot saved my life. Not literally, but in every way that matters. It was proof. Undeniable, irrefutable proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't the villain, wasn't the one in the wrong. Without it, the case would have been he said, she said. My word against theirs. And in that scenario, who knows what the judge would have decided? Maybe she would have believed me based on my documentation alone. But maybe not. Maybe Ryan and Carol's fake tears and fake bank statements would have been enough to sow doubt. Maybe I would have lost. But I didn't lose. Because I had that screenshot. Because I'd been meticulous. Because I'd protected myself even when I didn't know I'd need protection. So here's what I want you to take away from this story. Protect yourself. I don't care if it feels paranoid. I don't care if it feels unromantic. I don't care if your partner says, "Why are you keeping track? Don't you trust me?" Trust is earned. And if someone is trustworthy, they won't be threatened by documentation. They'll understand it. They'll appreciate it. They might even do it themselves. Keep records. Take screenshots. Save receipts. Protect yourself. Because someday you might need them. And when that day comes, you'll be glad you did. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been manipulated, used, gaslit, or taken advantage of, I want you to know you're not alone. And you're not stupid. You're human. And humans trust. That's not a flaw. That's what makes us beautiful. But beautiful doesn't mean defenseless. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell me your own story of justice, revenge, or standing up for yourself. I read every single one, and your stories matter. Subscribe if you want more content like this, because trust me, I've got more stories coming. Stories that will make you feel seen, validated, and ready to take on the world. Thanks for watching. I'm Emma, and I don't let anyone take advantage of me anymore.